Zinedine Zidane is taking over the France national team, and when he does, the squad Didier Deschamps built over 14 years is not walking through that door with him unchanged. Four names inside that dressing room are staring down the same question this summer. Will they even make the plane next time? Zidane's first training session hasn't happened yet, and already the whispers out of the French Federation are pointing at specific players who might not survive the transition. So let's get into who they are, and why his arrival is the reason their international careers might be ending right now. Here's where things stand. Didier Deschamps played his final match in charge of France in the third-place playoff against England at the 2026 World Cup, closing out 14 years and 185 games at the helm. Deschamps leaves after 14 years in charge of the national team, during which he oversaw 185 matches and guided France to the 2018 World Cup title, the 2020-21 Nations League trophy, the Euro 2016 final, and the 2022 World Cup final. That's the resume he's walking away with. Now it's Zidane's team. The move isn't a surprise. ESPN reported in March that former France star Zinedine Zidane will be the national team's next manager after reaching a verbal agreement. And more recently, French outlets have gone further with the exact date. French sports daily L'Equipe reports that 1998 World Cup winner and global football icon Zinedine Zidane will replace Didier Deschamps as France coach, with the report indicating Zidane will officially take over on 1 September. Zidane's first game in the dugout won't be a friendly either. Zidane's first match in charge is expected to come away to Turkey in the Nations League, before France host Italy at the Stade de France on 2 October. So he walks straight into competitive fixtures with almost no runway. And that's exactly why the squad conversation is happening now, not in a year. Insiders on French radio have already started sketching out what his team looks like, and the picture is blunt about who gets squeezed out. The first name that keeps coming up is Jules Kounde, on France's biggest football radio show, After Foot on RMC. Journalist Walid Akacher laid out his read of Zidane's likely back four and didn't hold back on the Barcelona defender. He said Malo Gusto would take the right back spot instead, because Jules Kounde is building muscle like never before and he no longer has any explosiveness. That's not a minor tactical note. That's a starter for 2 straight World Cups being told his body isn't doing what it used to. The second and third names are a pair that have been fixtures on the flanks for years, Theo Hernandez and Lucas Hernandez. Both have carried the French left and right side through multiple tournaments, and both are now being flagged as players who may not see out Zidane's first cycle. A CBS Sports breakdown of the post-World Cup landscape put it plainly, grouping them together with a veteran of the midfield. Theo Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez, and N'Golo Kante are among those who may no longer be part of the squad by the next major tournament, while younger talents such as Eduardo Camavinga and Lenny Yoro are expected to become key figures under Zidane. And that brings us to the fourth name, N'Golo Kante, the engine of France's midfield during their run to the 2018 title, now on the other side of 30. Mentioned in the same breath as the 2 fullbacks as a player whose international clock is running down under new management. 4 players, 2 fullbacks who define the wide areas of France's defense for the better part of a decade. A midfielder who won a World Cup running box to box, and a center-back who started this summer's tournament as an automatic pick. All 4 now sitting in the same uncertain spot the moment Zidane's name gets stamped on the contract. Why now though? Why would a coach walk in and start cutting players who were starters just weeks ago at a World Cup? Part of it is simply football. His mission will be to lead a new generation of players to another World Cup triumph. After France arguably failed to maximize one of the most talented squads in international soccer, winning only one of the last 3 World Cups despite reaching 2 finals in 8 years, and once again the top 4 in the current edition. When a federation brings in a manager with that mandate, the players tied to underachievement become the easiest ones to move on from, deserved or not. There's also the calendar. Zidane's first cycle in charge of the French national team will be centered around the 2030 World Cup, which is set to be hosted by Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. That's 4 years away. A coach building toward that timeline is going to think in terms of who's actually going to be at their peak in 2030, not who got him over the line in a Nations League group game in October. Theo Hernandez will be past 30 by then. Kante will be closer to 40 than 30. The math does a lot of the talking here. And then there's tactics. Every report coming out of France right now points to Zidane wanting his own identity on the pitch, not a photocopy of what came before. A tactical development could reshuffle the cards within the French squad, with Zidane reportedly planning a 4-3-3 built around a defensive midfielder and 2 relay midfielders. That's a specific shape with specific profiles required to run it. Not every player who thrived under Deschamps' setup is going to fit into Zidane's. So that's the shape of it. A legend walks into the job with a 4-year runway to 2030, a mandate to fix underperformance, a tactical blueprint that doesn't automatically include the old guard, and 4 names already circling the exit. 2 fullbacks, a World Cup winning midfielder, a center-back suddenly getting told his legs aren't what they were. Now let's actually dig into each of them, because the story behind why each one is on that list is different, and some of it goes back years before Zidane ever got the call. Start with the 2 who share a surname but nothing else, at least on the pitch. Theo Hernandez and Lucas Hernandez were never related. They just happened to carry the same name into the France squad from opposite ends of the pitch and opposite stages of their careers. But right now they're being talked about as a package deal, and that's exactly the problem. Theo Hernandez built his reputation as one of the most attacking left-backs in world football. Explosive out wide, a threat going forward. The kind of fullback who could turn defense into attack in about 4 seconds. That profile made him a fixture for Deschamps for years. But explosive fullbacks age in a specific way. The pace goes first, and once it does, everything else in their game gets exposed. Because their defensive discipline was never really the selling point to begin with. That's the quiet fear hanging over him now. Lucas Hernandez has a different story attached to him. Years of injuries have chipped away at a career that once looked destined to be one of the best center-back/left-back combinations in Europe. He's the kind of player who, on his day, can slot in anywhere across the back line. But international coaches don't build around on his day. They build around what a player can reliably give them over a 4-year cycle, and durability is exactly what's been in question. Put those 2 profiles next to each other, and you get exactly the kind of names a new coach flags for review. Not because either one was bad for France. Both have been full internationals contributing across major tournaments. But because a new manager, walking in with a mandate to build toward a tournament 4 years out, looks at a fading pace merchant and an injury-prone veteran and starts thinking about who replaces them, not who keeps them. That's precisely how the reporting has framed it. The CBS Sports breakdown of the post-World Cup landscape didn't hedge on this point, putting both Hernandez players directly in the group of veterans facing the end of their international careers under the incoming coach, right alongside the standout of France's World Cup winning midfield. Theo Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez, and N'Golo Kante are among those who may no longer be part of the squad by the next major tournament, while younger talents such as Eduardo Camavinga and Lenny Yoro are expected to become key figures under Zidane. Notice who gets named as the replacement generation there. Camavinga and Yoro, both are Real Madrid players. Both came through under a club that Zidane knows better than any team on the planet, having managed it twice and won 3 straight Champions League titles there. Zidane became the manager of Real Madrid Castilla, Real Madrid's B team, in 2014, before taking over Real Madrid in the early days of 2016. And the team went on to win La Liga in 2017 and capture 3 consecutive Champions League titles. When a coach with that relationship to a club starts assembling a national team, it's not exactly shocking that Real Madrid academy products get the benefit of the doubt over players from elsewhere. Now layer in the tactical shift. If Zidane really is moving toward the setup being reported on French radio, with wide forwards tucking inside and fullbacks needing to provide width on both sides of the pitch consistently, that puts a premium on stamina and positional discipline over explosive one-off bursts down the line. He will put a sentinel in front of the defense, and in front it is all eyes on the right, Doué on the left, and Mbappé in the axis. With wingers cutting inside like that, the fullbacks become the primary source of width. That's a demanding job. It's a job that rewards a fullback who can do it for 90 minutes over 4 matches in 11 days during an international window. Not one who's carrying the wear of a decade of high-speed sprints or a knee that's given him problems before. There's also a name mentioned as an alternative on the left. On the right, there will be Malo Gusto, and on the left side, there could be Maithili or Truffert. New options at both fullback spots, in other words, being floated in the same breath as the incumbents. That's not idle chatter. That's the sound of a manager's inner circle already mapping out a back line without assuming either Hernandez is guaranteed a spot in it. None of this means either player gets cut the day Zidane walks in the door. International squads don't work like that. A 4-year cycle to 2030 gives plenty of room for veterans to prove themselves in September and October before any real judgment gets made. But the language in the reporting could see reduced minutes. It's players who may no longer be part of the squad by the next major tournament. That's about as direct as preseason reporting gets on a subject like this. And for players who have given France a decade of fullback play between them, who have started World Cup finals and lifted trophies in blue, that's a heavy sentence to be handed before a ball's even been kicked under the new regime. It's the kind of forecast that puts real pressure on the first few call-ups of the Zidane era. Every training session in September becomes an audition. Every match in the Nations League window becomes a referendum on whether the reporting was right. That's the position both Hernandez players find themselves in right now. Not cut, not safe either. Suspended in the same uncertain middle ground that 4 names from this squad are all living in at once. Waiting to see if the manager who's about to walk through the door sees them the way Deschamps did, or the way the reporting out of French football is already predicting. If the Hernandez situation is about fading physical tools, N'Golo Kante's situation is about something more symbolic. He was the engine room of the 2018 World Cup winning midfield. The player opposing managers built entire game plans around trying to neutralize and never fully could. That version of Kante doesn't exist in a vacuum anymore. He's on the wrong side of 30 now. In a sport where midfielders who make their living covering every blade of grass tend to lose that ability before anything else goes. The reporting on him sits in exactly the same sentence as the 2 fullbacks. Theo Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez, and N'Golo Kante are among those who may no longer be part of the squad by the next major tournament, while younger talents such as Eduardo Camavinga and Lenny Yaro are expected to become key figures under Zidane. Same list, same forecast. A World Cup winner grouped with 2 defenders as the trio least likely to see out this new era. What makes Kante's case different is what he represents. He wasn't just a squad player who filled a role. He was the reason France could play the way they did in 2018, letting their attacking talent express itself in the final third because he was covering so much ground behind them that it didn't matter. Losing that kind of player isn't just a lineup change. It's losing a piece of the identity that won the country its second star. And that's exactly the tension Zidane is inheriting. Look at how the tactical blueprint has already been described. He will redo a 4-2-3-3, a sentinel, 2 relay midfielders, Zaire-Emery Rabiot or Zaire-Emery Kane. 2 names being floated for those relay midfield roles, and Kante isn't one of them. That's not an accident of reporting. That's a manager's camp already talking through midfield combinations without the 2018 hero factored into the primary plan. Part of that comes down to the physical reality of the position he plays. A box-to-box, ball-winning midfielder relies on repeated high-intensity sprints across 90 minutes, tournament after tournament, for years on end. That's the kind of role that ages a player's legs faster than almost any other position on the pitch. Center-backs can play into their late 30s reading the game instead of chasing it. Goalkeepers can go even longer. But a midfielder whose entire value proposition is ground covered and duels one has a shorter runway. And Kante has been running that particular race since before France's 2018 triumph. Zidane, of all people, understands what it means to build a midfield around control rather than pure engine power. As a player, he was never the one doing the covering. He was the one dictating tempo, the technician other players ran around. Zidane remains one of the greatest players in French football history, having inspired France to their maiden FIFA World Cup title in 1998 before leading them to UEFA Euro 2000 glory. A coach with that playing background tends to value technical progression and ball retention in central midfield, which is precisely why names like Zaire-Emery, Kane, and even Rabiot keep surfacing in these tactical breakdowns. As the profiles Zidane wants running his midfield engine room, rather than a specialist destroyer entering the twilight of his career. There's also the matter of timing lining up against Kante in a way it doesn't against some of his teammates. Zidane's cycle is built toward 2030, hosted across Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. Zidane's first cycle in charge of the French national team will be centered around the 2030 World Cup, which is set to be hosted by Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. 4 years from now, a midfielder who built his career on covering every blade of grass is an extremely difficult bet to make. Centre-backs like Kante or fullbacks with time on their side are easier long-term projects than a ball winner already past his physical peak. None of that erases what Kante did for this national team. Trophies don't get taken back. But international coaching, especially with a hard 4-year target on the calendar, isn't sentimental by design. It's about who's going to be functioning at the level required in the next World Cup cycle. And right now, the reporting suggests Kante isn't being penciled into that picture the way Camavinga or Yaro are. That's the quiet, heavier kind of exit some legends face. Not a public falling out, not an injury that ends things suddenly. Just a new coach's cycle beginning at the exact moment a player's body starts telling him the answer before the manager ever has to. Now to the one that's arguably the sharpest of the four, because it isn't really about age at all. Jules Kounde isn't some aging veteran being nudged out after a decade of service. He's a Barcelona defender who was a starter for France at this very World Cup. And the shot fired at him didn't come wrapped in diplomatic language. It came in one blunt sentence on live radio. Walid Akacher, breaking down Zidane's likely back four on after foot, didn't just suggest Kounde might lose his spot. He explained why in terms that got repeated across French football media within hours. On the right, there will be malo gusto because Jules Kounde is building muscle like never before, and he no longer has any explosiveness. That's not a tactical preference being described. That's a direct accusation that a player's training regime has cost him the very tool that made him effective in the first place. Think about what that means for a right back or center back at the international level. Explosiveness, that first step, that recovery speed, that's the entire currency of the position when you're up against the fastest wingers and forwards on the planet. If a scout or a journalist with inside knowledge of the France camp is saying publicly that Kounde has traded speed for size in the gym, that's about as damaging a read as you can get on a defender heading into a new coaching regime. And Kounde's situation isn't hypothetical or distant. He was a starter this tournament. He inherited the right side of France's defense from a World Cup winner and, by most accounts, handled that transition well over the course of his international career. But even respected voices covering the Spanish game have started raising the same question. Auteur d'une Coupe du Monde 2026 discrète, pour ne pas dire moyenne. Jules Kounde peut-il faire les frais de l'arrivée de Zidane à la tête de l'équipe de France? In Espagne on un est persuadé. Translated, the sentiment is simple. After a quiet tournament in Spain, people are convinced Kounde could pay the price for Zidane's arrival. That same reporting also flagged the man waiting to replace him. Malo Gusto's own performance at the World Cup wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement either, with his display in the third-place match against England drawing criticism. So this isn't a case of an obvious upgrade waiting in the wings. It's more that the position itself, right across France's back line, has been identified as an area Zidane is expected to address with force. Avec les gros matches de Ligue des Nations qui s'y profilent, Zinedine Zidane, successeur désigné de Didier Deschamps, assemble-t-il promised des trois forts. Strong decisions have reportedly already been promised, and that's before he's even taken his seat on the bench. There's also the matter of who else might be waiting in that queue. Pierre Kalulu, currently playing his club football at Juventus, has been mentioned as a versatile option who could compete for time on the right side of defense as well. Adding another name to a position that suddenly looks a lot more competitive than it did a month ago. Pierre Kalulu, joueur polyvalent à la Juventus Turin, ne possède pas non plus cette exclusivité du poste. No single heir apparent, in other words, just a defender under pressure from multiple directions at once. What makes this one sting differently than the others is the age gap. Kounde isn't the same generation as Kante or the two Hernandez players. He'll only be 29 at the next Euros. In football terms, that's supposed to be prime years for a center back or a right back, the stretch of a career where you're at your most complete. Reading the game with experience while still carrying enough physical capability to execute. For a player in that window to be publicly flagged as losing his defining physical trait right as a new manager walks in the door is a genuinely alarming position to be in. It also says something about how differently Zidane's camp appears to be evaluating players compared to how Deschamps did. Kounde was trusted, he started matches, he held down a spot that had big shoes to fill. None of that history seems to be buying him automatic security under the incoming staff. If anything, the specificity of the criticism, right down to describing his physique changing in the gym, suggests someone inside French football circles has actually been watching him closely and drawing conclusions that go beyond simple form. So of the four names caught in this transition, Kounde's case is the one built on the sharpest, most immediate evidence. Not a slow decline over years like the others. A single, pointed observation about explosiveness lost, delivered on national radio, at the exact moment his international future is being decided by someone new. So where does all of this leave the French national team as Zidane actually steps into the building? Two fullbacks whose age and durability are under a microscope. A World Cup winning midfielder whose legs are being weighed against a 4-year cycle he may not last through. And a defender still in his prime years being told, in blunt terms, that he's lost the one physical trait his whole game was built on. But it's worth zooming out because these four aren't the whole story of what's changing. They're the headline exits. Around them, an entire generation is being reshuffled at the same time. And understanding that wider shift is what actually explains why these four in particular are the ones under threat. Start with who's rising as these names fade. Eduardo Camavinga and Lenny Yaro are expected to become key figures under Zidane. Both are products of the club Zidane knows better than anywhere else on earth. And both represent exactly the kind of long-term profile a coach building toward 2030 wants at the base of his team. Camavinga offers the engine and the ball progression that could eventually replace what Kante once gave the team. Yaro, still just a teenager when he broke into Real Madrid's first team, represents the kind of center-back Zidane can build a defense around for the better part of a decade, not just one cycle. Then there's the attacking picture, which is arguably even more crowded than the defensive one. Meanwhile, attacking prospects like Rayan Cherki and Desire Dow should enjoy a much more prominent role than they did this summer. That's notable because Cherki's path under Zidane hasn't actually been a straight line upward. The same reporting that flagged Kounde's decline also poured cold water on Cherki ever becoming a guaranteed starter, with one journalist bluntly suggesting he'd remain an option off the bench rather than a first-choice pick, the exact same role he held under Deschamps. Cherki Aurier place, non-super sub. So even among the players getting more opportunity, the hierarchy isn't settled. And then there's the name that might be the most surprising storyline of this entire transition. Ousmane Dembélé, a Ballon d'Or winner, being described by pundits inside French football as one of the era's biggest potential casualties. One respected voice on RMC didn't mince words, arguing Dembélé playing on the right wing has become bad for everyone involved, the team and the player himself, and predicting he'll be the fall guy of the new regime, specifically because of Zidane's arrival. That's a genuinely stunning thing to hear said about a player of his caliber. And it tells you just how deep this reshuffle is expected to run, well beyond the four names most directly in the crosshairs. There's a deeper current running underneath all of this too, one that goes back decades before any of these current players were even born. Zidane's own career carries a cautionary tale about what happens when a generational transition in French football goes wrong. Back in the late 80s, another France legend walked straight from playing into management of the national team, and the transition wasn't smooth. Despite having such a talented squad, France was disappointing to say the least as they failed to reach their full potential, failing to qualify for consecutive World Cups and having a disappointing outing at the Euros in between. It took a completely different coach, willing to drop established veterans and build around unproven youth, to eventually turn things around. Platini's replacement, Aime Jacquet, dropped the likes of established veterans and built his squad around younger players, one of whom was Zinedine Zidane, who scored a brace on his debut and soon became France's most essential player, propelling the country to victory at the 1998 World Cup. That history matters here because it means Zidane isn't just some outsider drawing up lineups in a vacuum. He is, quite literally, a product of a national team once being willing to cut proven veterans loose, in favor of unproven talent, and watching it pay off with a first World Cup title. If anyone in French football understands the logic of prioritizing the next generation over sentiment toward the last one, it's the man who benefited from exactly that decision as a young player himself. Deschamps, for what it's worth, isn't walking away bitter about any of it. He's been clear for over a year that this moment was coming on his own terms. He told French television plainly that once the World Cup ended, his time would be up, that he'd given everything he had to the job, and that there comes a point where a person has to be able to step aside. One has to be able to say stop, there's a life after this, Deschamps added, saying the most important thing is for France to stay at the top as they have been for many years. That's the tone he struck throughout, a coach handing over a talented squad rather than one fleeing a collapsing project. And that's really the crux of the situation Zidane is stepping into. He isn't inheriting a broken team. He's inheriting one that reached the Final Four of a World Cup. stacked with attacking talent that most nations would kill for. The job in front of him isn't rebuilding from rubble. It's deciding which parts of an already talented group get to come with him toward 2030, and which parts get left in the era that just ended. For Theo Hernandez and Lucas Hernandez, that means their pace and their fitness records are effectively on trial the moment training resumes. For Kante, it means a legacy secured by a World Cup medal is running up against a calendar that simply isn't on his side anymore. And for Kounde, it means a single, pointed public read on his physical decline has attached itself to his name, right as the man who will decide his future takes his seat on the bench. None of it is final yet. Zidane hasn't picked a squad. No call-up list has gone out. The September window against Turkey and the October date with Italy at the Stade de France will be the first real evidence of who he actually trusts, versus who the reporting simply predicted he wouldn't. France will face Turkey, Italy, and Belgium twice in an expanded international window, giving the new manager an immediate opportunity to show his authority on the team. But the pattern across every report out of the French camp this summer points in one direction, and it involves the exact 4 names that have been under the microscope from the start. A new coach, a 4-year build toward a World Cup on Iberian and North African soil, and a group of proven internationals whose bodies, form, or fit into a new system have all been called into question at precisely the same time. Whatever happens when the squad list actually drops, this is the moment the Zidane era in French football truly begins. And it's already decided, before a single ball has been kicked, exactly whose careers in blue are hanging by a thread. Yahoo Sports, what to know about Zinedine Zidane replacing Didier Deschamps. Morocco World News, Zidane to become France's new head coach. Euronews, French media report Zidane will start as France coach on 1 September. Yahoo Sports, Zidane set to take over France as Deschamps' era ends. Daily Beirut, Zidane to coach France national team from Sept 1, 2026. OneFootball, Zinedine Zidane agrees to succeed Didier Deschamps. Business Standard, Zidane set to succeed Deschamps as France head coach. Fox Sports, Zinedine Zidane reaches verbal agreement to replace Didier Deschamps as France boss after World Cup 2026. Yahoo Sports, Zinedine Zidane to take over from Didier Deschamps on September 1st. MSN France team, Zidane set to drop 5 Deschamps mainstays. NY1 AP, with Deschamps stepping down, Zidane is in pole position. CBS Sports, what's next for France after World Cup semi-final loss? Zinedine Zidane likely roster changes and more. French Football Weekly, Zinedine Zidane, first big decision in the French team. BIN Sports, Zinedine Zidane will have a serious problem when he takes over. Le Temps Sport, la première grande décision de Zidane est révélée sur RMC. Yahoo Actualités Info RMC Sport, derniers ajustements avant l'arrivée de Zidane. Les titres du PSG, Dembélé sur le fusible de la future équipe de France sous Zidane. Foot 11, Jules Kounde, premier fusible de Zidane. ESPN France move from Deschamps to Zidane, wondering what could have been. Sportskeeda, 5 instances when departure of essential personnel deteriorated team performances.